everybody, and welcome to the 23rd edition of the Small Ball Podcast. I'm Charlie Rogers. He's Chancey Rogers, and special guest tonight, Perry Turner. Chancey's been at a rec ball draft, and he's calling it a after meeting, but it's really an after party, I think. Chancey, you wanna introduce Perry before you have to go, and then we'll take it away from there. I don't think Chancey's service is great. Hey, unmute yourself. I know I told you to mute yourself, but unmute it now.
Am I on mute? Oh, hey,
Yeah, there you
can
go.
you hear me now?
Yeah. There you,
Yeah. So yeah, I found me a little spot where it's not as loud, but we're at a very nice, civilized establishment, the Harvey's here in Starkville. So yes, Rec Ball Draft is an event. I'm learning. This is my second year in it up here in Starkville, and so my boys are just walking in right now. Matter of fact, but um, we're going to talk about it at our establishment. I got us a table right here. So we've been trying to make this happen for weeks. Mr. Perry Turner, who we talk about every week, I feel like.
I was going to say weeks. We've been trying to make this happen for a year.
Oh, I know it. I know it. He's every conversation that happens, every topic that gets brought up, somehow it leads back to Perry. Perry, just to give my history of Perry, I've watched Perry grow up. His dad was the local reporter, the newspaper guy, the sports analyst of Greene County, Mr. Russell Turner. And shout out to Russell, shout out to Greene County Herald. Longtime family business, great family. His mom cut my hair when I was younger, all kind of stuff. We had a connection. And this dude turned into one of the best trainers, not only in our area, but in the state, in the region, in my opinion. And the results have shown, and the fact that he's still at work tonight at Traction shows it. But super proud to have him on, super proud to have him kind of in our corner. But ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Perry Turner.
I appreciate that.
Perry, you said it was either still be at Traction or be home with a screaming baby. Is that right?
Yeah, I got a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old. So our house is full speed all the time. Right around bedtime, right when it gets the craziest. So right when I get home, I'm enjoying that.
Good. Awesome. Perry, we do talk about you every week, and I mean it always comes up, and it's never, hey, let's talk about Perry. It's always talking to some athlete or talking to some coach or somebody locally, and they've all interacted with you. They've all had some kind of dealings with you and Traction Sports Performance and everything that you've got going on there. Tell us, Perry, how you got where you are. Chancey mentioned your dad and all that, but just tell us how you ended up here doing what you're doing. Is this something you always wanted to do? Or just tell us how you got there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to try to condense it a little bit. It started back in high school, dealing with a few injuries. I didn't have anyone besides my coaches, my high school coaches, the baseball coaches, and some of the football coaches that would help in the weight room. But it was very basic, nothing wrong with it. Wasn't individualized. It was just what they have done in college or what they have done in high school, what they've had a lot of success with. But very bare bones strength conditioning. It wasn't consistent, which at the time most high school programs weren't in the weight room. No speed training. Arm care was pretty much go out there and throw and take some time off during the winter, and that was about it. But I had a decent high school career. I had a chance to go play college ball at Jones my first 2 years of college, and I knew going into Jones, I got to play for Coach Ostrander, and he was like, you got to gain a lot of velocity, and that was what I set out to do the summer before my freshman year. Got introduced to Jaeger Sports, and they're famous for J Band. Started their throwing program, and it's a great throwing program. I just did it a little extreme, and I ran into some elbow issues that turned into chronic tendonitis. And I was like, man, how do I prevent this? I'm working out hard, and it just turns out I just wasn't doing the right thing. So at that point at Jones, I decided that I wasn't going to do physical therapy anymore and be on the rehab side of things. I wanted to be on the preventative side. How can I help myself out, and how can I help athletes out in the future to not run into the same problems that I had? And my problems were very mild. There's a lot of athletes around me that had a lot more problems than I did. After Jones, I went to Mississippi College mainly because they had a great strength coach at the time, Michael Shoemaker. I had a few other offers, and out of the offer,
Hats off to Coach Shue.
yep, he's the man. He took me under his wing at Mississippi College. I started an internship right away, so I was playing baseball and doing an internship with him throughout my baseball career at Mississippi College. After that, I went and did an internship at Southern Miss, which turned into a graduate assistantship with Southern Miss, where I worked with the football team and the baseball team, and a couple other sports like golf and tennis and track, but football and baseball. And then I got introduced to a really smart man by the name of Eric Cressy, and I got to do a training / internship with him where I got to shadow him. He took me under his wing as well, treated me like I was a Major League Baseball player and I was a nobody at the time. But that's just the kind of person he is and the kind of professional he was. He picked me up from the hotel. We were down in Jupiter, Florida at his new facility at the time. And I learned a lot under him. And that whole time I'm thinking I wanted to be in the college sector for strength and conditioning. And I got a job offer out of the blue from Michael Shoemaker to be the Chinese Olympic softball strength coach. And at first I was like, I don't know. And after talking with my wife, we decided to do it as they were qualifying for the Olympics. And once in a lifetime opportunity to do that. Ended up accepting that position, got out of the college sector, college strength conditioning. And ever since then, I've really enjoyed the private sector, which is what I do now, working with individual athletes. We have contracts with schools too, but worked with the Chinese Olympic softball team for a year. We were one run short from qualifying for the Olympics. The way the Olympics work, the host country gets to pick what sports are in the Olympics. At the time, it was in Japan, and Japan has a really good softball team. So does the United States, so does Canada. So we were on that fourth spot, and Australia ended up beating us by one run after we beat them all year. So we did not qualify, but it was a blessing in disguise because right when we moved back to Hattiesburg, COVID hit. I would have been stuck in China during COVID. But luckily, I was in Hattiesburg and started working for Traction Sports Performance, and I've been here for 6.5 years now, if I'm counting right, or right at 6 years. So,
what about?
I didn't know the I didn't know the COVID part about it, but I knew that story, but I didn't know the COVID part. You're right, that was a blessing in disguise for sure.
Absolutely,
yeah,
terrible.
Especially with it being China. Talk about being in China. What was that like? I mean, do you have a translator? Just what was that like?
So actually, we did not ever go to China. They came to us.
Okay.
So we were actually living in Florida. We spent 6 months at a training facility in Cocoa Beach, and then 6 months at a training facility in Daytona Beach. But we had a lot of translator. Each American coach had their own translator that was by their side pretty much the whole day. And then I think there were 6 American coaches and 6 Chinese coaches. I was the strength coach, and we had 4 or 5 other softball American coaches and then 6 Chinese coaches. And they, of course, had translators too. So it was a constant. Of course, they know English better than we know Chinese or knew Chinese at the time. But even then, even the girls and coaches that spoke the best English, a lot of things got lost in translation. But it really helped me as a coach. I learned how to coach without being able to really speak easy to them.
So, Charlie, let me say a few things before I get off here. And I'm going to let y'all just get after it because I know you got a lot to ask him and y'all roll with it. Perry's one of them. He's like me. You open the gate and turn him loose, and he's great.
Wind him up, let him go.
Wind him up, let him go. And if the ones that are listening that don't know, Perry's helped me with just about every showcase I've ever done. I just call Perry and say, hey, here's the date. I need you here because I don't want anybody else doing it. Unbelievable job. I don't even have to worry about it. Him and his guys, his team there at Traction, do a great job with that. You mentioned Ostrander. I just talked to him about 2 3 hours ago, right before Mississippi State put that whipping on them. Um,
Oh
but
yeah.
uh, um, but I talked to Oz, talked to Pato, and Oz. So Perry played under him, and Coach Ostrander is a different kind of coach, and he appreciates what Miss Dr. Rogers does. On our end, and he was a big advocate when she was getting her doctorate, and so was Perry. And I think it just kind of rolls over to kind of their personality and their mindset of how to get these kids better, and they know the mental side is a huge part. The sad thing about Southern Miss, they just can't afford a Dr. Rogers, so Coach Oz is their mental performance, but he does a great job there. But Perry was one of the while Allison was getting her hours, he helped assign some athletes to help her get her hours there, and definitely pushes it on his guys that run through there. So I want to say hats off to that. We hadn't talked about that much, but she definitely appreciates it. Has tons of respect for what Perry does. They're kind of on the same end. I always compared it like Perry's the physical, trainer in a sense, and she's the mental trainer. And but they both have to coexist, and they're both needed in the industry. And they've both been disrespected in the past. Where back in the old days, like, oh, you don't even need to do none of that arm care and speed stuff. You want to, you want to get faster, run some hills. And then same thing, like you don't need a mental coach. Go, you need to go do some push-ups or something. So I think that they both fields have shined in the last 10 years, and it's great to have good ones like Perry and Dr. Allison. So
Yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. Especially with the baseball players. Just we train a lot of baseball players here, and I find myself, and that's why we used Allison and wanted her here and wanted her talking to the athletes, because we talk more about the mental side sometimes than the physical side, especially with our baseball athletes. And that's one thing that our parents talk about with is the confidence that these athletes get when they know that they're doing everything right physically and taking care of their body, eating the right things, training hard, but training smart. But even then, you have to have such a that mental edge to be really successful, to be able to handle the highs and handle the lows in all sports, but especially baseball.
no doubt, no doubt. All right, boys, I'm gonna go in here and we're gonna do our celebration rec ball draft. You guys get after it. I'm gonna share it everywhere, and I'm gonna come back and listen to it. Appreciate you, Perry, as always, and I'm gonna see you when I'm back down south. I'm gonna come see you.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
All right, see you,
All
bro.
right, Chancey. So, Perry, tell us, we talked about how you got where you are. We can see all the equipment in the background, and I think people kind of have an idea, but tell us just what you do. Tell us what you do there at Traction.
Yes, I'll start with just the vision that we had with Traction Sports Performance. We partner with Hattiesburg Clinic to help bridge the gap from rehab to performance. Now, we train mainly healthy athletes, athletes that don't have any major uh, injuries, of course, but we also, the vision is to be able to take these athletes that go through their physical therapy, whether insurance runs up or they run out of time with their physical therapy. We are here to bridge that gap to getting back to 100%. Physical therapists do a great job, but a lot of times they are handcuffed with either time per session or time in the total duration of their therapy. And athletic trainers do a great job too, but at these schools, but a lot of times they're swamped with one athletic trainer with 300, 400 athletes.
Hmm.
Uh, so we're here to bridge that gap. Hattiesburg Clinic has great physical therapists and great athletic trainers, and we're just that go between to help get athletes from point A to point B a little faster, and to be able to continue the rehab process and teach them how to advance and get a little bit more aggressive with their training and how to continue to do that once they are healthy and back on the field.
So
But
you
we also,
guys, Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, it's fine. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so you guys obviously anybody can come in there, but Hattiesburg Clinic does send folks to you guys, right?
Yeah. They give them the option to be able to come in like, hey, we finished up your rehab. You are good to begin the return to play. You need to follow these 10 steps or these 5 steps before you're 100%. And we're here to kind of take that and individualize it to get them exactly where they need to be. And with healthy athletes that come, just the athlete that doesn't have any major problems or isn't coming back from like an ACL or a UCL or a labrum or whatever the case is, we take them. We also individualize their program. We look for any precursors that we might be able to link to maybe a future injury. We can't prevent all injuries because most of these sports are very violent, but we can reduce the likelihood of it. So we take them through an evaluation and individualize their program as well.
And you're not working with, I mean, obviously you're a baseball guy, but you're not working with just baseball players, right?
No, majority of our athletes on the individual side, the semi-private side, are baseball players, but we work with all sports. We have contracts with William Carey where we do their strength conditioning. I'm actually wearing William Carey basketball shirt right now. Shout out to them. They went undefeated this season, so I was a big win for them. They're
I'm a
actually
William Carey grad, so I have to cheer for the Crusaders.
Crusaders, yep. So we do their strength conditioning. So baseball, soft, men's soccer, women's basketball, men's basketball, swim, cheer. We do all those sports. We also have contracts with some gymnastics plays, with some high school dance teams, with other high school baseball teams. So we work with all sports. But just because of my background and my niche, we do get a lot of baseball players.
Is the you talked about recovering from injury and that kind of thing, but you guys are also doing some speed and agility stuff. You're also doing not only come back from injury stuff, but get better at your craft stuff.
Absolutely. And we work on the whole picture. So speed, functional mobility, that's actually going to benefit you in your sport. Functional strength, that's actually going to benefit you in your sport. And then just general strength, just to kind of help create some resilience and some robustness so we can hopefully reduce the likelihood of injuries that you might go into. We give athletes arm care or knee care for our jumping athletes and our baseball catchers that spend a lot of or put a lot of pressure on their knees. We do it all, and but our niche from just one thing that we really dove into the past couple of years is our speed training. You're right. We've worked really hard at perfecting our model, and we're always looking for ways to get our athletes faster and the systems that we use and how we individualize our speed training. But we've been able to get a lot of our athletes really fast. And it's in part, yes, of the X's and O's of what we do, but we're also really blessed to have some awesome athletes and some very talented athletes that we work with that make our job really easy because they're very coachable and they're very athletic.
And you're doing it, you're working with kids from young ages to older. I mean, obviously I've said it before on here, my son came to you guys during the summer to work on some things. He's 12, he was 11 then. But you're working with even younger kids than that, just to try to get mobility and speed and agility and that kind of thing.
That's right.
Up going.
Yep. Generally, our threshold is 8 years old. We've trained younger. We don't train our 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10-year-olds like adults or like professional baseball players. Yes, they are training aspects like that, but we're training them like a kid, the way that they need to be trained to help with long-term development. No one cares how good they are right now. Of course, we want them to be good and we want them to be
right.
successful, but we have that long-term picture in mind. We want to make sure that we're setting them up for success, setting them up to be as fast as possible, as explosive as possible. But yes, when they get to that post-puberty, and sometimes even pre-puberty, depending on the athlete, that's when we really start catering and individualizing our training to each athlete.
So you talked about all the different sports. how much of the training for different sports, say baseball to soccer to cheer, how much of it is similar, and then how much of it is different? I am familiar with one or two sports, and I know a lot of the stuff is the same, but then you also have some individualized stuff. So when you have such a wide range, how much do you change it up for the different sports, and how difficult is that to do from one day to the next?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of differences when you come to each sport in the sport in and of itself, but when we're looking at improving performance, there's more similarities than there are differences. Now, the differences might be a huge, important piece of the puzzle that we're putting together, uh, but the generalities are very similar. If you were an athlete and you were 18 years old and you were a baseball player and a cheerleader, that training would overlap a lot. Of
Mhm.
course, for our baseball players, we're going to be doing a lot more rotational training and anti-rotational training and arm care and a lot of T-spine mobility. But that T-spine mobility would go into our cheerleaders too, and they would be doing stuff. But what would really make the difference is that individualized approach. So if you and your twin brother were training with us, y'all would be doing two different things based off your bodies. We have
Mhm.
a few twins that we work with, and they're training different in a lot of ways, but they also have a lot of similarities in their training. We have athletes that play baseball, and then another athlete that might play basketball. They have a lot of similarities in their training, but if you look at their two programs, they also have a lot of differences. But those minute differences make a big difference in that. We always consider it a puzzle that we're trying to put together with performance and what makes each athlete tick with our speed training, getting them faster, what makes them tick to get them more explosive. And that piece of the puzzle, that one small piece of the puzzle in the total program might make the biggest difference in the outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And to do that, you have to have a good, nice facility, and you guys have a state of the art facility there, and you're attached there to the sports medicine department of the Hattiesburg Clinic, and we can see some of the stuff behind you there. But just tell us a little bit about, or you can tell us a lot about, because there's a lot there, a lot about the facility that you have and the things that you've got to work with there.
Yeah, I'll start off with the part of the building that we're not in every day, which is Hattiesburg Clinic. We work right next door, right down the hallway, actually, to the physical therapy, the main physical therapy clinic. And then upstairs is our orthopedic doctors and orthopedic surgeons office. So we're right next door. If we have an athlete that is coming down from ACL surgery, she did her surgery here or with these doctors from Hattiesburg Clinic, they would go into physical therapy with our physical therapist. And then it's just a seamless transition into getting them back on the field. And we usually partner with their athletic trainers to make sure we're not overdoing anything on our end or contradicting what they're trying to do. But as far as what we have here at Traction, we have 45 yards of turf. It's about 20 yards wide, 45 yards long. We have an extension of turf outside. It's about 15 yards, two batting cages. We have four racks, which doesn't seem like a lot, but the way that our training model is, we keep our groups relatively small for our semi-private training, so we're never really crowded there. We do that on purpose to make sure that our quality of coaching is really high for each athlete. It's not one-on-one training every time, but we try to make it feel like that every time. We want each athlete to know, okay, I'm getting the best work and the best coaching. As far as equipment, everything you could possibly need. Of course, we're always trying to improve our technology and improve our equipment, but dumbbells, barbells, trap bars, cardio equipment, everything that you can need for arm care. We have aqua bags and aqua balls, which we use for our rotational athletes like baseball and softball and tennis and golf and volleyball. Uh, and we really use a lot of that. But yeah, everything you could possibly need with our turf. That's where we do all of our sprinting and change direction. We're able to time 40-yard dashes. We time 60-yard dashes. and then everything less than that as well. We have timing systems that we use to make sure that we're getting accurate data on our sprints, to make sure that we're getting faster each month. Some athletes improve so much on their first couple of sessions, they're improving each session. But usually with our athletes that have been training with us 4 or 5 years, we're looking to see, okay, did we improve this month? We might have ebbs and flows in our speed training, but as long as the overall trend is high or increasing, that's what we're looking for. But yeah, state of the art, we're very blessed here with everything you could possibly need. Hattiesburg Clinic did a great job with designing this building and implementing a lot of it, and we're glad to be partners with them for sure.
I see some pitchers mounds behind you
Yeah,
there.
we got pitchers
Uh,
mounds. Just
there's
because,
a there you didn't mention it, but there's about half a basketball court down there on
that's right.
the end.
That's a huge part. I'll turn. You can't really see it from here, but basketball court, which is another blessing and a curse. It's a double-edged sword because everybody thinks they're basketball players. So when we actually
Yep.
get basketball players in here training that can shoot, it is a breath of fresh air because a lot of our non-basketball players think they are basketball players. So we got to keep them off the basketball court as much as possible. But yeah, we have people that do basketball lessons here, and they do a great job. We have baseball instructors too that mainly do it on the pitching side. We contract out, or not contract out, we send guys to some other guys in town, Chancey being one of them, for our hitting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big believer in getting the right people at the right spot, and I haven't found that person that I trust enough to hire here that isn't working somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But we have 2 guys on the pitching side that do a great job, Will Whittington and JC Keys. But we send for hitting instruction, we send out to other people.
So you also do some, obviously we talked about like the kid speed and agility classes, but I know that when we've been up there before, or I've been up there with Jackson before, you guys have some adult classes and stuff there too, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we have a morning adult group, an afternoon adult group. The morning adult group trains at 11 Monday through Thursday. In the past, we've had some 5:30 a.m. groups, some 6:30 a.m. groups, some 8:30 a.m. groups, but we've shifted a lot of our focus to what we're getting a lot of, and that's our athletes training. So it's hard to be able to juggle both that early morning and afternoon. So we don't do as much early morning adult anymore, but we do have that mid morning and that afternoon adult sessions.
So I want to talk a little bit. You're a baseball guy, obviously. So I want to talk a little bit about, and this is a baseball podcast for the most part, just about baseball training. Let's start with arm care, because that's something that ended your playing time, something you struggled with, something that probably still is taken more seriously now, but probably still not taken as seriously as it should be by most players. Just talk a little bit about why that's important and how to really take care of the arm for baseball players, softball players specifically.
Yeah. So the problem that I see the most now is you have 2 sides of the spectrum. You have the old school spectrum where it's just my arm care is throwing and taking a break, and that's about all I do. I throw and then I take a break. I throw and then I take a break. I don't do bands. I don't do any strength training or preventative work. And then you have the other side of the spectrum where it's my arm care is my J bands, and that's all I do. So all they're doing is taking care of that one single arm care. They're doing my pre-throwing bands and my post-throwing bands, which is great, but in of itself isn't enough for true arm care. When we look at true arm care, we look at the whole body, from the toes and the ankle and the bottom of the foot all the way up the leg into the rest of the kinetic chain up through the elbow and into the arm. We feel like if you're not taking care of the whole body, then you're really setting yourself up for a incomplete arm care program. So that's what we do. Of course, we do your typical arm care exercises, and that's how we gain most of our athletes' trust is saying, yes, we absolutely do that. And this is how we do this. And this is how you do that arm care with the correct form. But at the same time, we're educating them on, okay, you got to take care of the rest of the body too. Your core is so important. And this is how we train our core, not just with old school sit ups. We're doing anti-rotational exercises and rotational exercises. We're training all parts of the core. We're training the lower half in a way that isn't going to teach us to be slow, but it's teaching us how to be explosive, but yet strong. Because everything that we do, and I catch myself talking about it all the time, in the realm of strength conditioning and sports performances, everything's on a spectrum. You can go far too far on one side of the spectrum, and then you can do far too little on the other side of the spectrum. You're usually going to always be somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, and there might be times where you go one way or the other. You might do more arm care in one part of your career or one part of the year, but you need to be in that middle where you're doing the arm care and you're taking care of the rest of your body.
What about the guy that says, I'm not a pitcher, I don't need to take care of my arm like pitchers do?
Unfortunately, that's the ones that we deal with the most that have the most arm problems. Because
Right.
I'm not a pitcher. I don't need to take care of my arm. I don't need to do these J bands or these plyo care exercises or these medicine ball exercises. All I do is throw it from third to first. That's a lot of throws when you count in your warm up and your in between inning throws and then all your throwing. And if you don't build up properly, if you take some time off and then you don't build up properly, then you are going to run into problems. And yeah, you might not be throwing 90 pitches, but if you counted every throw that you throw during the game, especially during doubleheaders, it's going to be up there. And a lot of those are going to be high intensity throws too. So we see a lot of bicep tendonitis, elbow tendonitis with our non-pitchers. And we make the joke where it's like, treat yourself like a pitcher. If that's the mindset that you have to be in, treat yourself like a pitcher. But it's really just arm care. When you're an overhead athlete, whether it's a tennis player, a volleyball player, a baseball player, a quarterback, that position is not normal or not what's the word I'm looking for? It's not something
It's not
that's
a natural
natural.
motion.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't see as many issues in a softball player, especially a pitcher, just because that motion is a little bit more natural. Now, if you don't take care of your body as a softball pitcher, you're going to run into problems too, but it's not as prevalent. So we tell our position players, hey, you have to have a warm-up routine. You have to warm up the body, then you warm up the arm, and then you warm up the kinetic chain. And I think if you look at the best in college baseball and the best in professional baseball, and you average them out, the majority of those athletes are doing arm care, even if they're not pitchers. And that's why in the 19th inning, in a random Tuesday night game, you can get those shortstops that are throwing 95 miles per hour right down the middle. They don't have the pitching disease yet, or they're too imperfect. But it's absolutely just as critical for that shortstop or that left fielder to take care of the arm, especially if they're wanting to have a long career or a happy career where you're not always, oh, my shoulder's killing me. So we have to take into account not just warming up that day, but also making sure we're not jumping from not throwing it all for a month and then ramping up straight into full speed throws too. So we try to look at the full picture for arm.
There's one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand, particularly with throwing sports, football, baseball, is the importance of the core exercise. They always hear people say core, use your core. It comes from your core, whatever. But I think a lot of people don't understand what that means and how to work that. Can you tell us a little bit about your core?
Yeah, and I think that it's so hard and so ambiguous, if that's the right word, because there's so much that goes into the core training. If you flash back 15 years ago, core training was sit-ups and crunches and bicycles and you name it. That's how we were training. But you're really only training the anterior core when you do those exercises, which is important. But you also got to be able to train the other parts of the core, the deep core and the part of the core that's technically our lower body and the part of the core that's technically our upper body. You'll hear in the baseball realm anti-rotational training, and essentially that's just resisting movement. with the core instead of producing movement. Now, obviously, baseball and other sports are movement based, meaning that your core is going to be moving, but to correctly produce force up the kinetic chain without losing energy, for a lack of a better word, your core has to be able to resist that torque to be able to apply that torque at the right time, and that's when timing comes into everything. But it's very the core is an aspect for athletes that they really can never get to a point where you're like, my core is strong enough. At least I
Mhm.
haven't had an athlete yet where I'm like, all right, we don't need to get your core much stronger. I've had plenty of athletes I've been working with for a long time, uh, that were like, okay, yes, we want to continue to get stronger, but we're not as focused on it. Now we're trying to get those minute details of little aspects of your strength, where there's the joint strength or a little muscle strength. We're not worried about you back squatting 405 pounds. Whereas some athletes that you use that back squat or that front squat as just a way to get general strength, which most athletes need.
You mentioned squats. I think one of the questions a lot of people have is at what point, at what age, is it safe for a kid to start working with weights? I'm sure you get that question a lot, but eh, tell us a little bit about that. At what point is it okay or safe for kids to start working with weights and things like do some weight training?
Yeah, research shows us that at a very early age you can begin loaded training or weight training. Now, obviously, that needs to be very dialed down. And like I said earlier, we tell parents we're not going to train your son or your daughter like an adult. She's not an adult.
Hmm.
She's a 10-year-old that is growing rapidly. And while loaded movements are shown to help produce stronger bones and stronger ligaments and actually help with mobility if you do them right, uh, we're not going to be loading the bar up and back squatting. We've actually, I think, as a industry, exercises like back squat and bench press aren't as prevalent. They're great exercises, but we save them for certain athletes. Instead, we're doing a lot of unilateral training or single leg training with our athletes to mimic sport. We're able to load that in a way that's safer for sport. And to answer your question, what we tell parents is yes, we want to start at an early age. We need to do it very smart. We're going to spend most of our time sprinting and jumping and throwing medicine balls. But we are going to begin to, one, teach them technique with certain exercises, because we know that when they get on a high school team or a junior high team, not everyone is going to have the same philosophy that we have. And right or wrong or indifferent, that's just the way it is in a lot of these sports now, where yeah, we're going to work out, but it's what we did 25 years ago. And
Hmm.
which sometimes that hard-nosed training has a lot of benefits, but sometimes it can do more harm than good. But what we want to do for our athletes is, no matter what that coach tells those athletes to do, whether it's back squat or run through a wall, they're going to be ready for that, as a metaphor. But
So
we
you're not teaching them how to literally run through a wall.
Yeah, that's right. So there are coaches that I would try to run through a wall for,
Yeah, absolutely.
but anyways,
It's interesting. It's interesting the information and the technology, how it's come so far. Because, like you just said, when I was in high school, which wasn't extremely long ago, but when I was in high school, really was just squat and bench. I mean, that was what you were doing. And now you say that kind of gets pushed to the side for kind of certain athletes and certain things that they're trying to do. But you guys are working on more uh, specific, muscle specific things and sport specific things.
yeah, that's right. And we tell like our interns and our parents and our athletes, because we're trying to educate everyone and educate, especially our athletes, on why we're doing things. It's not that back squats or barbell bench press are bad exercises. They're actually really good exercises when you're looking at bang for your buck strength. The problem that we run into is improper implication, or rushing into it. Just like anything, there's no, there's really no black or white with strength conditioning, speed training, performance, there's a lot of gray area. It's not always that this is a bad exercise. It just might be a wrong exercise at the wrong time. So yeah, if you come in here on a random day and say throughout the day we have 25 athletes training with us in our semi-private group, or if you come to the William Carey weight room and we're working with athletes, especially with our high school athletes here, if you walk in here, out of the 25, maybe 1 or 2 are going to squat on any day. And those are athletes that we're either preparing for the high school football weight room, or they're athletes that have been with us for a long time. We're trying to attain a goal, and we have deemed that exercise to be the best way to attain that goal. Now, we've already done the proper work to make sure their core is strong enough, their low back is strong enough to handle those weights. And with our younger athletes, we might back squat with them, but it might just be the bar. Or more likely, we're going to do what we call a goblet squat, where they're holding the weight right here to make sure we're teaching them the right technique.
Yeah, you can really hurt yourself trying to do back squats and not knowing what you're doing, or working with too much weight.
Anything.
Really,
Go ahead. What I was going to say is anything that's a sport, like powerlifting or Olympic lifting, it's a sport for a reason. And just like any sport, it can be violent. So if you look at powerlifting, back squat, bench press, deadlift, you see injuries in those 3 exercises throughout the strength and conditioning realm every day. Everything that we do has an inherent risk. If you look at the power cleans that a lot of teams do, or a lot of athletes do, and we have some athletes here that do it. Again, we have deemed that exercise to be important for them for a number of reasons. There's other exercises that we believe that are superior to that for most athletes. There's always a million exercises that you can replicate some of the same stimulus and some of the same benefits without the high risk. But when you look at Olympic lifting and like power cleans and snatches and jerks, they all have an inherent risk too. So there's a reason those are sports, because there is a risk to it. There's also a reward to it, and being able to know when to implement what and how and when is our job.
One of the things that another thing that probably wasn't as focused on in the past that really is now, and you hear people say it's one of the most important things you can do, is stretching. Talk about, Perry, the importance of stretching and the benefits of it, the proper stretching and the types of stretches that are really important for athletes in general.
Yeah, so just like anything, and I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but there's spectrums to it. You can do too much of anything or too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, right? But for most athletes, they're not stretching enough. What we do, and we've had a lot of benefit and a lot of success with this, is we do your typical stretching at the end of the session, but we also do a lot of loaded mobility, so very light loads, but putting an athlete into a certain position, because our bodies adapt to things. Our bodies get really good at certain things that we expose it to, and stretching's one of it. After a certain point for our athletes, if we keep doing the same 10 to 20 stretches, their body gets really good at it. And while they might be flexible, it might not be beneficial to their sport. So what we want to do is make sure that they can handle those mobility ranges during their sport, and in a way that they can maximize their performance and minimize their injury. But yes, there's 2 types of stretches when you look at it. If you don't count loaded mobility, you have dynamic stretching and static stretching. Static stretching is what most people think of when they think of stretching. It's the bend over, touch your toes, or long, slow stretches, and that definitely has a place. What most athletes need to do also, or what all athletes need to do also, is that dynamic stretching, which is what you'll see before a workout or before practice, or what you should see before workout or before practice, before game. Research shows us that doing those dynamic stretches, it kind of primes us a little bit better. It keeps us able to, for lack of a better word, it kind of keeps us able to use those fast twitch fibers a little bit more effectively. There is such thing as being too stretched out before game. And if you talk with a lot of our veteran athletes that have really embraced not just what we do and what we teach them, but embrace their journey of figuring out what makes their body tick, as you begin to talk to them, you can realize real quick that, hey, I can be too stretched out and I actually want to be stiff in certain areas. So they'll do some exercises to kind of create some perceived stiffness. Now, a lot of those athletes that have that perceived stiffness, if you look at just a flexibility spectrum, they're some of the most flexible athletes that we have. But to perform well, they know that they need to feel a certain stiffness in their muscles. So you don't want to get too stretched out, but obviously you want to stretch out before you play. And as you get older, you definitely want to stretch out because
Yeah.
you're sitting all day at your work or you're sitting all day in your car. Our body isn't meant to sit like that, and especially for long periods. And unfortunately, we're seeing that effect trickle down to athletes too because they're sitting 8 hours in the class, and a lot of schools are doing a lot to help with that, just getting around and moving around. But at the end of the day, it's a toll on these athletes. So we're seeing a lot of low back things with our new athletes, and even with our existing athletes. If we don't, we do a good job of staying on top of it, but if they're not doing the stuff that they're supposed to do at home and outside of their training with us, you start seeing that low back creep in because again, they're playing violent sports and then they're going to sit all day at school, which they have to, but they have to do things to counteract that as well.
And you don't have to stretch. You don't have to only stretch before you go to practice or something like that. I mean, you can do stretching every night, right? I mean, you can do those things all the time.
Absolutely. So we implement them during our workouts. We have mobility that they're doing before the workouts, during the workouts, and after the workouts. And then a lot of our athletes have at-home programs that they're doing so that they know the stretches they're supposed to be doing. A lot of our athletes, especially our new athletes, oh, I'm struggling with this. I have this low back pain, or I'm coming back from this injury. Well, they have a stretch routine that they need to be doing throughout the day, just like you talked about. And even our healthy athletes, we want to, of course, we don't want to overstretch, but there has to be some type of routine there. And if you look at the most successful athletes, they have that routine. They don't get off of it very much. And if they do get off of it a little bit, they're able to adapt and get what they need. But they also know their body really well. So that's one thing that we really focus on is we tell our athletes, we will never know your body as good as you do. But right now you don't know how to understand your body. So it's our jobs to teach you to pick up on the cues that your body's giving you and use that.
Perry, this may be elementary and something that I think most people probably know, but we live in the South. It gets very hot here. Talk a little bit about hydration and safety, heat safety, that kind of thing.
It's not elementary at all. It's actually one of the most, I wouldn't say it's the most debated, but it is debated on what true hydration is. Most athletes, if they will just drink what the daily recommendation of water is, they will be a lot better off. And to cut out processed liquid and carbonated drinks and sugary drinks, they will be a lot better off. Now, if you really start digging deep into hydration and how the body truly gets hydrated, then you can go off on some rabbit holes. And I think there's a lot of merit to some of those rabbit holes. But for the majority of athletes and the majority of people, if we can just cut out those sugary, processed, carbonated, all the things that essentially aren't water, we would be better off. Now, just like anything, you can go too far off on the other side of the spectrum, and most athletes don't get this far. But you can drink too much water. But as far as safety, schools are doing a lot better job at looking at the wet bulb and the heat index and what the heat really is, and making sure their athletes are well prepared for that. And if you look at most athletic trainers' bags during the summer, they have those salt tablets, which is what a lot of these rabbit holes are, is teaching or showing us that the body doesn't accept just H2O. It needs something to link with it, for lack of better words. But you'll see a lot of salt tablets and electrolytes that these athletic trainers have, and those are crucial too. So we tell our athletes, first step, just drink water. If you want to get to the bare bones, you need to drink more water and cut out your sugary drinks, your Dr. Peppers, and your even your Powerades. You're just drinking a ton of Powerades. It has a lot of sugar in it, but that sugar also can be helpful in certain situations. But the Dr. Pepper sugar definitely is not.
I was going to ask you where you stand on sports drinks versus water.
I think they're popular for a reason. They have a lot of good things for them, but just like anything, it's not a perfect hydration. And
Some of them are very sweet.
yeah, and they know what they're doing, and they know their marketing, and the athletes are going to be kids, and they're going to like that sugary drink. There's a lot of recipes for homemade Powerade, and I tell parents all the time, if you can get your hands on that, that's probably going to be a better alternative for you. It takes a little bit more work. Uh, might be fresh squeezed lemons and Himalayan salt and stuff like that, but you're probably going to save a little bit of money, and your kid probably isn't going to drink as much sugar. Uh, but at the same time, that the sugar in those drinks and those Powerades can be beneficial for certain athletes. So there's a reason it's in there on both sides of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Make kids drink them, but also it has some functional to it. And I'm not a registered dietitian by any means, and me and my staff are very careful with giving out nutrition advice and hydration advice, but we try to redirect them to a dietitian. We're actually working on getting ourselves a registered dietitian to be able to answer these questions. Just like I obsess with the performance side of things, and Dr. Allison obsesses on the mental side of things, we want someone that obsesses with the nutrition side of things. So you got to be very careful there with giving that. But I think from a broad standpoint, uh, sport drinks serve a lot of good. And if athletes can cut down on their other sugary drinks and also on their sport drinks, drink it for the electrolytes and not just drink it because you don't want to drink water. Yes, they can cut down on their Dr. Peppers, which is seems to be our favorite drink for our athletes here at Traction. Cutting out Dr. Peppers, you think you're cutting off someone's arm, but cutting off those processed sugary drinks would do an athlete a lot of good from a hydration standpoint. They'd probably feel a lot better too. And they can find other ways to get their caffeine, which we tell our athletes, you're a high schooler, you got plenty of energy. You don't need to be relying on this caffeine. But it's a stimulant for a reason. So it can do some good at certain times.
I'll put you on the spot here. What is something that you think is extremely important that athletes in general need to know or need to be doing? What's something that you try to tell every athlete you come in contact with?
It goes back to what I was saying earlier with what we've really dove into the past 2 years, and that's speed training. If you look at speed residuals or how long speed stays with you, you lose it in 5 days. You lose that true your max speed in 5 days. So if you're not sprinting at least every 5 days, we tell our athletes every 3 days. If you're not sprinting at a very high velocity, you're setting yourself up not to be fast, and you're setting yourself up for a higher risk of injury. That's when we see the most hamstring injuries is athletes that aren't prioritizing their speed training, or they're only doing short sprints. And when I say long sprints, I just mean usually 30 yards or more. Sometimes with certain athletes, 20 yards would be a long sprint for them, just because the way their body is, not because they're lazy. I would say, to answer your question, if an athlete, even a golfer, if they're not focusing on some type of speed training, they could get a lot of benefit from that. Now, with our golfer onlys, I just use that as a sport. I can't think of a better sport right now. You never sprint in the game of golf. In the typical game of golf, there is speed golf now, but you don't sprint in the game of golf. But these golfers can get a lot of benefit, especially these younger golfers can get a lot of benefit from these short sprints, just because you cannot replicate that fast twitch fiber recruitment, and anything in the weight room from a lower body perspective. And we see our speed swing increase with sprint training with our golfers.
Really,
And they,
that's interesting. I would have never thought. I would have never thought of that.
yeah, and I'll butcher this, but when we sprint, we're producing. I think it's 5 times your body weight. It might be a little bit more than that. On a low end, 5 times your body weight. If you're sprinting fast or sprint as hard as you can, you won't ever see an athlete squatting or single leg squatting or doing anything 5 times their body weight.
Yeah.
You'll see some athletes, like some of our power lifters, they might deadlift, 2.5 times more than their body weight. But 5 times is just something you can't replicate in anything else besides sprinting. So even for a golfer, now we're not timing our 40s with our golfers, especially our high school and college golfers, but we are doing sprints, 10-yard sprints,
Mm-hmm.
5-yard sprints, 3-yard sprints. We might not even time them, but just to get that stimulus. And if we do time, it's more so just so we know that the athlete is giving 100% effort, or so that they know they have something to compete against. Because running can get monotonous just like anything, but we use our laser timers to kind of make sure, one, we're improving, and two, so you're competing against yourself every single time. But long story short, sprinting is one of the most overlooked aspects of training and sports performance. It's one of the most lowest hanging fruit, or the lowest hanging fruit. It's something that anyone can go out in the backyard and do. Obviously, there's a lot of technique to it. You can just ask anybody with a young kid. It's like, well, my kid can't sprint. Yeah, he might have some technical things, but he needs to be sprinting often, and especially our high school athletes. Some of the biggest success stories that we've had with our sprinters, or with our, to use baseball examples, since it's a mainly baseball podcast, the 60-yard dash. We see the best results with our 60-yard dash with our athletes that sprint the most.
Mm-hmm.
We've had athletes that have went down from 7.5 second 60 to 6.5 60 in a matter of a year, sometimes less. And it's just from sprinting often. It's no crazy technique change. Of course, we're working on our technique, but just sprinting often and sprinting hard does a lot of good for an athlete.
Just doing it.
Yeah. Just do it, yeah. And obviously, there's always that inherent risk with anything that we do. And we've been really fortunate, and we work really hard on preventing these injuries. But you do this long enough, you might have a hamstring tweak with the perfect athlete when you're sprinting. But if you're getting that hamstring tweak in a controlled environment, it's definitely going to happen in a chaos environment such as sport. But like I said, we've been really lucky here. Our athletes take care of their bodies for the most part. We are overcautious with our not only our warm-ups, but making sure we're ramping athletes up to where we haven't ran into that issue. But great strength coaches and great sport coaches have ran into those problems, and not because they haven't prepared, but just because sprinting is a violent action.
I'm glad I asked that question, because sprinting is not the answer I would have thought. I don't know what I would have thought the answer would be, but when I asked the question, what would you tell every athlete? Sprint a lot. It wasn't one of the answers I was thinking. So I'm glad I asked that.
Yeah, you just can't replicate it in anything in the weight room. If you look at the fastest sprinters in the world, they probably have a very strong core too. So that's going to benefit you too, and you're going to have strong hip flexors, or at least you're going to be strengthening those hip flexors, which is going to help us with our low back pain. It's going to help us rotate better. It's going to help us get up the kinetic chain a little bit more efficiently, so we don't run into as many shoulder problems and elbow problems. But just like anything, if I had a baseball player that all he did was sprint and he didn't take care of the rest of the pieces of the puzzle, yeah, he's going to run into problems. But generalities, sprinting is the most overlooked aspect from a team training side of things, from a individual performance side of things. And that's why we have dove so deep into perfecting our model and getting athletes faster. And if you look at majority of team sports, if you're fast, you're going to be very effective.
Yeah. Let's kind of bring it back around, and we'll start wrapping it up. But Chancey mentioned that he doesn't do a showcase. that you don't help with, or basically run. I mean, we've been to a couple of those. What are you looking at? What are you looking for at baseball showcases? So I know you do some explosion drills. You do the 60, some of those things. What are you looking for? What are baseball guys or training guys looking for at a showcase when it comes to um, your area?
So when we do a showcase, my main goal is to expose that athlete to a very simple yet effective dynamic warm up. That's number one. It's like, hey, how can we start to warm up our body? And as I'm doing it, I'm explaining, okay, this is why we're doing this little exercise. And even if only one athlete out of the 25, 50 athletes that are there hears it, I made an impact there. So I try to explain as much as possible, and I realize that will go in one ear out the other. But athletes pick up on a lot of things, and they might not know the exact answer to everything, but they'll remember a lot of what you do with them. So we're working on that dynamic warm up. That's the first thing that we do. And then we go into what we call speed preparation, or short, what we say is speed prep. And it does two main things for us. It has two agendas. It's helping us warm up for the sprint, so we're not just going from touching our toes to sprinting full speed. We're ramping up in our intensity, but we're also working on technique. So we usually pick 3 to 6 exercises that we're doing that is warming us up and it's kind of hammering in on some of our technique. Even athletes I've been working with 6 years, we still work on those speed prep drills. Now theirs might be a little bit more advanced on a given day, but the the basics of that speed prep is the same with all of our athletes. After that, I'm looking for little things that I can fix on a couple athletes. In that setting, it's hard to really hone in on every athlete. But I start seeing, and I've been doing this long enough, and my staff's been doing this long enough. We can start seeing those generalities, and we know going in, okay, this age group usually struggles with X, Y, Z. So let's be looking for that. And throughout that speed prep, we're reminding them, hey, we want our toe to look like this. We want our knee to look like this. We want our hand to look like this, or our core to look like this. And this is why we're doing that drill. And we know that probably won't sink in and won't affect their 60 much that day. But if it's something that they can work on for the next 3 weeks, it will affect their 60 in a positive way. After that, usually my job in the showcase is to start timing the 60-yard dashes. That's usually the first thing that we'll do. And then we're using our laser system to give a time. So we're able to tell the athlete, okay, this is where you're at in your speed journey. This is something that you will be able to tell your coaches or any scouts, this is what I ran. But this is also how you get better at it. So we'll say, hey, you remember that A skip that we did and what that is? And if you could just teach yourself to drive that knee up a little higher, pull that toe up to your shin, or strike the ground on the balls of your feet instead of your heels, whatever the case is, that might be, you'll improve your 60. And what we do for most of our showcases is we take some notes and we try to follow up with those athletes with the email that's given. And it's very, very basic, as any short session might be. But we do believe that if that athlete would go in and do those 3 drills that we sent to them, or even just one of those drills, that they would get faster. And then we shift into like a vertical jump segment or a broad jump segment, or change of direction timing system. Uh, and at that point, we're just seeing, okay, how much force can you produce?
Mm-hmm.
Let's forget about technique for the first one. Let's just see how much raw power you have. And then there might be a couple of things that we tweak. But even with athletes, like if you're prepping for the NFL combine, there's techniques for that broad jump and that vertical jump, but it's really 90% of it is just producing a lot of force. And that's what these NFL scouts are looking for. That's what these MLB scouts are looking for. How much potential do you have? What's your projectability? Do you have a good stature, and can you produce a lot of force? And a lot of scouts are now saying, well, that's my project. If you can produce that kind of velocity, then I'll work with you on the other end. And by no means am I like, let's forsake everything and chase velocity, because pitching is still important. And pitching will still win you a lot of games. The art of pitching is what I'm speaking on, throwing strikes and being able to get hitters off balance. and producing a lot of bat speed is very important. Uh, but it's not the sole thing that we're focusing on, but it will help if you're doing the right things mentally, doing the right things technically, and then on top of that, training in a way that's going to maximize your performance. It does help a lot. But to go back to the showcases, essentially my job from then on, I'm kind of following up with some of the athletes. I might hold the radar gun for some of these athletes. I might pick up on a couple of things. And by no means a pitching coach, and I don't claim to be, or a throwing coach or a hitting coach, but there are certain things just from being around the game and working with very high level baseball players that I'm able to pick up on, or at least point them in the right direction.
Well, a lot of that stuff. I mean, the base of most of that stuff is body movement, and that's where you excel. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense that you would be able to pick up on pick up on something that might improve a guy's velo, or might help a guy get the ball out quicker, or something like that. So
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
makes a lot of sense. So we talked about Chansey refers to you. I mean, you've obviously worked with just about every Bulls athlete there is. You've got contracts with schools, but talk about how somebody who either wants to get stronger, faster themselves, or has a young athlete that they want to get in with you. How can they contact you? How can they get in with you guys?
They can go to our social media. That's probably the easiest way to, one, see what we're about. We try to put, and I need to do a better job of it, but we try to put a lot of content up there on, okay, this is what we do. So when an athlete is coming in on their first day, they kind of have an idea of how things might flow and things that they might see. So it's not a complete culture shock. Even though when most athletes walk in here for the first time, it definitely has the wow factor, this facility. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but social media on Facebook and Instagram, they can reach out. Also on there is my personal email and personal phone number that they can reach out. And most likely, especially these local athletes, someone on their team is training with us, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how we do most of our advertising is word of mouth. Uh, we appreciate that a lot, and these athletes and these parents know what we do and know the job that we have. So we encourage new athletes to talk to their teammates that are training with us, and parents to talk with other parents that are training with us, so that they know, like, this is not just a dilly dally project that we're doing. We
Mm-hmm.
we we take that investment very seriously, and we work on that. But my phone number is on the website, Traction Sports Performance Mississippi. They can Google that and it'll pop up. Make sure they click on the Mississippi part, but also on our social media, Traction Sports Performance Mississippi. That's probably the best way to get in touch.
Where are you located? We talked about the facility, but tell folks where it is.
So if people are familiar with Hattiesburg, we're real close to Tatum Park off of Highway 11. We are, I might be wrong here, but we're right outside the city limits. So we're real close to downtown. But if you uh, are familiar with Hattiesburg, Tatum Park, if you turn into Tatum Park, you're going to see us on the left. Our address is 105 Medical Park. You can type that into your phone and be able to find out where we are. Uh, we're right across the street from Southern Bone and Joint. That's usually how I explain it to people. It's just landmarks.
Yeah,
Tatum Park, Hattiesburg Clinic, Southern Bone
the
and Joint,
the YMCA is right there.
YMCA. That's right. So we're in that area. I think this is considered the medical district that we're in, uh, but we consider our Hattiesburg Clinic Tatum Park campus is where we're at.
Fantastic. Perry, before I let you go, is there anything else you need to get out there? Anything you want to say? Anything we missed that you think is very important for people to hear?
We know that we're not going to be able to train every athlete in the Pine Belt. We are very blessed to train some of the best athletes in the Pine Belt. Of course, there are athletes in the Pine Belt that are very great athletes that we might not train, but most of them we are training, and we're very blessed there. But to the athletes that we don't train with, there's a lot of great content online, and there's also a lot of trash online, and you have to be very careful. Uh, I think that people like us are very important to just point an athlete in the right direction. Some people, and you take everything with a grain of salt. And I tell our athletes that even take what I say with a grain of salt. It's your body. We're here to kind of help guide you there. But there's a lot of great content online that you can find. Driveline, take everything with a grain of salt again, and you might not do their whole program. But Eric Cressy, Zach DeChant, Cressy Sports Performance, Tread Athletics for baseball. They have some good strength conditioning stuff, and they put out a lot of free content. But my advice to athletes would be sprint, throw some medicine balls, keep the training as simple as possible. Progressive overload, meaning don't jump straight to your max on your first day. Ramp up your body and everything that you do, whether it's throwing, sprinting, weight room. Start off with something and gradually increase the intensity or the weight of it. And then we'd love to train you. So come in, get an evaluation. That's our first step for our older athletes is come in, run you through a full mobility, speed, and power assessment where we kind of put you on a spectrum and base our initial program off of that. So we know where to start and we individualize that. And then we get rocking and rolling. And the results speak for ourselves or itself. And if we tell our athletes all the time, if you're not getting the results, then we're not doing our job. And it's that simple. And that it's very cutthroat in sports performance where we have a job. And if we're not doing our job, then you shouldn't pay us to do that job. So we don't take that lightly either. And we give the athletes the X's and O's, but we've been really blessed to have athletes that are very coachable. They listen to us. They challenge us in a lot of ways where it's like, and what I mean by that, it's not disrespectful, but they're beginning to learn their body. And that's what we really encourage from our athletes where, well, Perry, what if I did this? What if I do that? And it's always countered with me with why? Why do you want to do that? Or why do you think that? And then we go towards that in some type of way. Now, of course, we're working with athletes and athletes get in their head, and that's why Dr. Allison is so important. But a lot of time, an athlete will know their body better than you, and you have to take everything that they say and put it through a filter and figure out, okay, where are they coming from with that remark or that question? And they're trying to get to the bottom of that puzzle. And if we could put that puzzle together, that's when athletes really thrive mentally, physically, and of course at their sport.
Fantastic. Perry Turner, Traction Sports Performance, man, I appreciate you. This has been extremely informative. I hate Chancey had to dip out on us because I know he had comments too. But man, this has been great. And like I said, we talk about you every week, so we'll have you back on at some point. I'm sure we'll get more questions for you. Hey, y'all ask Perry this, ask Perry that, so we'll get you back on to answer some of those. But in the meantime, everybody go see Perry Turner and his crew. He's got a great crew at Traction Sports Performance. And again, just appreciate you coming on with us tonight. I'm Charlie Rogers for Chancey Rogers. He wasn't here. Joe Gray was out as well. It was just me and Perry Turner, but it was a fun show. I appreciate you being here. This has been the Small Ball Podcast. We'll see you next week.